Hello, I'm Superintendent Ron Thiele. For this video update, several members of my cabinet and I will be addressing issues and questions we've received over the past few weeks as we continue to manage the impact of COVID-19 on our school district. First, I would like to acknowledge and thank our staff for your continued efforts at providing a quality remote teaching and learning experience for our students. I would also like to thank the classroom teachers who have welcomed me into your virtual classrooms and those that I will be visiting in the coming days and weeks. It is truly impressive to see how our teachers, students, and families have worked to make the most of this challenging time for public education during this terrible pandemic. What you have all done and continue to do is impressive. Having said that, I know we still have a strong desire to see our students in person when it's appropriate to do so. As I've shared previously, we closely follow Public Health of Seattle and King County COVID-19 Data Dashboard, Toolkit, and the Washington State Public Health Decision Tree for information that informs our planning. You can find links to all these important resources on the COVID FAQ page on the district website. We will also continue to update that page as new information comes available. Unfortunately, our region, like so many around the country, is experiencing increasing COVID-19 cases per 100,000 residents and an increasing effective reproductive number. If you follow this data, you know we have moved out of the moderate risk category back into the high risk category. We are also listening to our public health officials' warnings about colder weather moving us indoors, cold and flu season coming, and a general COVID fatigue setting in on people and causing some of us to lessen our individual mitigation efforts. All of this can make it harder for us to flatten the curve and get our numbers back down so we can bring staff and students into our schools for small group, hybrid in-person teaching and learning. Again, I plead with our community to practice good virus mitigation behaviors of wearing face coverings, staying home when you're not feeling well, and frequent hand washing. I must say, given our current COVID-19 case numbers, bringing our students back into the schools will likely not occur anytime too soon. Just the fact that we are still at 92 cases per 100,000 in our county with an effective reproductive number of 1.5 means we have a ways to go before we are back in the moderate risk category. While no one can say with certainty what the virus will do in our county, I seriously doubt we will be successful at bringing entire classes of students back for in-person learning over the next several weeks. It pains me even more to say that we will likely not reach numbers that would allow us to bring our 6th through 12th grade students in for hybrid in-person learning before the end of this current semester in late January of 2021. I know this is not a message our students, staff, and families want to hear, but I've been accused of creating false hope when I speak about my desire and belief related to in-person instruction. I am hopeful, and I believe we will get to a place where we can bring our students back into the schools. But I also have to be realistic and acknowledge this likely time frame is much further out than I, for one, have been hoping for. There is some good news, however, and you'll hear more about that shortly. But we have successfully operated childcare since the start of the pandemic and continue to do so today, as well as serve over 150 students with special needs from ages 3 through 21. We also continue to have productive conversations with our labor groups, including our teachers, related to planning and preparation for in-person instruction. Our plan is to have all the details of a solid in-person teaching and learning plan worked out, so when the numbers come down, we can give advance notice to our families and bring our students in. Finally, I just want to recognize the hard work and long hours our ISD staff including my cabinet level administrators, have put into the planning and implementation of our ISD Live remote teaching and learning system, while simultaneously negotiating and planning for a hybrid in-person system. I'm so grateful for all the efforts that our staff, students, and families have made to educate for the education of our community's children, and also grateful to our PTSAs, the Issaquah Schools Foundation, and our local service area clubs for all they continue to do in support of our public schools. Thank you for that. At this time, I'll be turning the meeting over to our Deputy Superintendent, Dr. Josh Almay, and he'll coordinate the remainder of this session as you hear updates from our administrators. Josh, take it away.
Thank you, Superintendent Thiele, and welcome again to our community for joining us tonight. This evening, you will hear from a number of different departments with updates and information relevant to remote learning, in-person learning, facilities, and more. In just a moment, I will give an update on secondary education as well as an update on students we are currently serving with in-person learning. After that, you will hear from Executive Director Donna Hood on high school athletics and updates from the WIAA. Next, we'll transition to hearing from Assistant Superintendent Jody Bongard, who will talk about our plans for elementary students and what a day in the life of a kindergarten or first grade student will look like when they return to in-person learning. After that, we'll hear from Executive Director Martin Turney, who will update you all on facilities, our cleaning methods, food distribution, and transportation. After Martin, we'll hear from our Assistant Superintendent Lisa Heckman, who will go over our current safety protocols and district response plans for COVID. And last, Superintendent Thiele will bring us to closure with some parting words. With that, I'd like to start by talking about students that we are currently serving in person in our ISD schools. Over the past 3 weeks, we've transitioned back to in-person learning for our elementary, middle, and high school LRC2 students. I had the honor of being at a number of schools when we welcomed these students back, and I can tell you, it was truly the highlight of my week. In addition, we're also serving students in our ACT program, ages 18 to 21, with in-person learning. And in regards to our very youngest learners, we have all of our students in our ECAP and ECE preschool programs attending in-person learning in our buildings. Thank you to our LRC2, ACT, ECE, and ECAP teachers, paraprofessionals, and specialists for your great work in welcoming our students in these programs back to in-person learning over the past 3 weeks. Next, I wanted to take a moment and talk about our students at the secondary level. As Superintendent Thiele said in his previous comments, we don't anticipate middle or high school students returning to in-person learning until the start of second semester at the earliest. With that, the district made a commitment back in August to get feedback from our students, parents, and instructional staff on the high school schedule we're currently using during remote learning. We wanted to give the schedule some time for teachers and students to settle into the school year before we asked for that feedback. In early November, we will be surveying our students, parents, and instructional staff at the high school level on how they feel the current schedule is working for them. Look for communications from the district on that survey in a few weeks. Now, let's transition to a topic we've received a lot of questions on over the past few weeks, high school athletics. I'd like to hand it over to our Executive Director, Donna Hood. Donna, take it away.
Thank you. Right now, high schools are in an optional out-of-season period that we typically experience during our summer months. Our case counts have risen into the low 90s in the last couple of days and weeks, and the guidance from the Department of Health strongly encourages us not to conduct in-person extracurricular activities with case rates at this level. So for now, we are still on hold for middle school and high school athletics. That said, we remain hopeful that our case counts will decline again and stay there. In the meantime, our athletic directors are constructing site-specific safety plans that we can submit to the Department of Health for an eventual resumption of some in-person conditioning in small groups, should our case numbers go down and stay there, and should we be able to bring more students in for educational services. We will also continue to monitor updates from the WIAA. They met yesterday, and I was hoping I was going to see some publication of the results, but I haven't yet seen that today. Our ASB and activity coordinators are hard at work adjusting their practices to the virtual environment that we find ourselves in, and we want to encourage our high school students to join one of our many interest clubs that are now meeting virtually. Thank you, and back to you, Dr. Almy.
Thank you, Donna. Next, we will transition to elementary school and Assistant Superintendent Jody Bongard, who will walk us through a day in the life of a kindergarten or first grade student when they return to in-person learning. Jody, take it away.
Thank you, Dr. Almy. Well, I know that everyone is eager to learn what the schedule will look like for our kindergarten and first grade students when we do have the opportunity to welcome them back into our elementary schools for in-person learning. However, before I share that, I do want our community to know that COVID mitigation protocols that proved to be highly effective for our K-5 summer school program, as well as our ECAP program, will be in place at each of our elementary schools when students return. So, okay, now on to the schedule. So our students will be on a hybrid schedule and will attend school for half a day, which is 3.5 hours, 4 days per week. Wednesdays will be remote. On Monday, Tuesday, and Thursday, Friday, students will attend school from 9 o'clock until 12:30. Since no lunch will be provided at school, students will have a recess and snack break in the morning. And then in the afternoon from 1:30 to 3:30, students will continue to learn remotely at home. Students will be engaged in independent learning, or they may be meeting remotely with their teachers as part of a small group. Students will also access their specialist classes, such as PE, music, library, asynchronously in the afternoons as well. So, what does a day in the life of a kindergarten or first grade student look like in this hybrid model? Well, prior to the start of each school day, parents will receive an electronic notification asking them to complete an attestation verifying that their child is not showing symptoms of COVID and that they haven't been exposed to anyone testing positive for COVID or with symptoms of COVID. Both staff and students will be required to wear masks at school. If riding the bus, students will be required to put their mask on before boarding the bus. And if parents or guardians are dropping students off, masks must be put on once they arrive at school and prior to temperature checks. Upon arriving at school each day, all students will have their temperatures taken. For students riding the bus, this will occur as soon as they exit the bus. Students arriving by car will have their temperatures taken before they exit the vehicle. And walkers will be checked as they arrive to the front of the building. Each classroom will have an assigned space for students to line up as they wait to enter the building. The lines will be marked with that 6 feet of physical distancing between students. In buildings that do have multiple entry points, students at each grade level will enter and exit the building through different doors. And prior to entering the building each day, students will use hand sanitizer. We're going to operate off of a scrub in, scrub out model, meaning that throughout the day, any time that students enter or leave the building or enter and leave their classroom, they will either wash their hands or use hand sanitizer. And while transitioning in and out of the classroom, students again will be asked to maintain that 6 feet of physical distancing. So in the classroom, students will find their physical arrangement of student desks looks a little bit different than they may have experienced in the past. To assist in setting up classrooms with the required physical distancing, our district operations and facilities department actually built these 6-foot triangle spacing templates, and they use these spacing templates in setting up every one of our kindergarten and first grade classrooms to ensure that the recommended guidance of 6 feet of physical distancing between students while seated at their desk was followed. Another thing that will be different is that students will not be sharing communal supplies. Each student will have their own set of supplies. Now, manipulatives such as Unifix cubes or counters that may be used by students during instruction, for example, during a math lesson, those will be disinfected prior to being used again. What students and families will find to be the same is a warm, welcoming teacher who is eager to greet students each day, develop relationships, promote community building, and social emotional learning, in addition to providing instruction in the core areas of reading, writing, and math. And then our social studies and science will be integrated into those core content areas. As I mentioned earlier, students will have a recess and snack break in the mid-morning. Students will wash their hands prior to the recess snack break. And recess will really be an opportunity for our students to take a break from those masks, eat their snack, get some fresh air and some exercise. While students can take a break from wearing their mask, they can also choose to wear it during recess time. Some activities will actually require that students wear a mask. So if they happen to be in the zone where the big toy is, they will be required to wear a mask if they choose to play on that toy. Our playgrounds will be divided into zones and classrooms will be assigned zones to play in. These assigned zones will rotate so students have the opportunity to play in different areas of the playground. Equipment such as balls and jump ropes will be available in some of the zones, and those will be sprayed with disinfectant after each use. Students will use hand sanitizer as they enter the building following recess, and then they'll wash their hands upon returning to class. Many questions have come up about the use of restrooms. Students will be assigned bathrooms by grade level or their classroom location in the building. And students using the restroom during class time will wash their hands as they exit the class and wash them again upon returning. Signs will also be posted in or near our restrooms, reminding students to wash their hands before leaving the restroom. Protocols will also be in place, so the number of students in a bathroom at one time is limited. And the waiting area outside of bathrooms will have those little round wait spots marking 6 feet of distance. At the end of the day, students will exit the building through their assigned exit routes, and the boarding of our buses will be staggered so that we don't have too many students waiting outside at any given time. Students will again maintain that 6 feet of physical distancing in line and while walking to the bus, and again in line as they wait to board the bus. Students who get picked up by a parent or guardian will have a designated waiting area and will be lined up 6 feet apart in that area as well. So this hybrid student schedule includes an hour break for transport home and lunch at home before students engage in the remote part of their learning in the afternoon. With this hybrid schedule, the student day will end at 3:30. And I would be remiss if I didn't acknowledge the planning efforts of our elementary principals who have been engaged in this work for the past several weeks to ensure that mitigation protocols and plans are detailed and complete so that we can welcome your students back when we have the opportunity to in-person learning.
Thank you, Jody. Next, we will pivot to Executive Director Martin Turney, who will talk about our disinfecting and cleaning protocols, HVAC systems, PPE and related equipment, transportation and buses, and our food distribution efforts. Martin, take it away.
Thank you, Dr. Almy. As mentioned, I'll be giving some updates from the facilities department. First, I wanted to mention about personal protective equipment and what the district has been acquiring in large quantities since the spring. So we've been increasing our inventory month after month. We have ordered tens of thousands of the reusable cloth face coverings, which are ISD logo. We have enough to provide 2 for every student and staff member. And they come in various sizes to cover the youngest to the oldest students. We have disposable face coverings. Sometimes students don't bring them or we need them for other reasons. So we have surgical style masks and the typical sizes, and we also have child size disposables as well. We have acquired face shields, the over the face clear face shields, and we have enough to provide those to all staff members. So you can anticipate those being worn by teachers and other staff. And in specialized cases for positions that require them, we also have N95 and KN95 masks available. In addition, we have disposable gowns, gloves, and shoe coverings for them. We have distributed plexiglass and acrylic sneeze guards. Those are for staff who work with students in close proximity and for prolonged periods of time. They're also for any of our staff that are public facing that may need to act with visitors or anyone else from the public. Some related equipment that we have in place, Jody mentioned that we will be taking temperatures. So we do have non-contact body temperature scanners. You show your face to the scanner, it takes your temperature. They're on adjustable stands, so we can adjust the height to the level and the height of the students. And each of our buildings now has these at designated entry points. We also have handheld infrared thermometers that take the temperature of the forehead, and these can be used in instances, like Jody mentioned, where we walk up to the car and take temperatures. In terms of cleaning and disinfecting, and we've got a lot of questions about this, we base what we do on guidelines from the Centers for Disease Control, Environmental Protection Agency, and the Washington State Department of Health. What our custodians are going to be using for disinfectant cleaner is hydrogen peroxide based, is on the list of EPA COVID-19 disinfectants. So that indicates its effectiveness related to COVID-19. So in addition to our custodians using those, we're going to provide a spray bottle for each classroom. So if during the day, teachers determine that they would like to use it for disinfecting or cleaning a space, they can do that. Our custodial equipment will include handheld and backpack electrostatic sprayers. It will use the same hydrogen peroxide disinfectant. And what they do is it produces a fine mist that adheres to surfaces for effective disinfection. And they're very fast and efficient, so they can get in after each class and make sure that they get those done quickly. In terms of hand sanitizer, we have 80% alcohol solution hand sanitizer. It does not include methanol, if that's a concern for you. Classrooms each classroom will have a spray bottle of that as well. So teachers, if they choose, can spray the hands of students and make sure that they have some hand sanitizer without those spray bottles being shared among various individuals. We've also placed other sanitizer stations throughout the schools at strategic locations, so hopefully within close proximity to anyone as they're in the building. So custodial work has shifted. We will continue to do typical custodial tasks such as cleaning floors, emptying trash, and any other dirty surfaces. However, the shift is that primary objective is now COVID-19 related disinfecting and cleaning. So that is the primary objective. Disinfecting will occur, as mentioned, after every class. So custodians will make sure they get in there using the cleaner and disinfectant and clean every classroom. Focus areas are the high touch points around the building, and custodians will do this continually throughout the day. Examples of these high touch points are bathrooms, desks, countertops, doorknobs, computer keyboards, and faucet handles, among other areas. Questions have come up about playground equipment. So the larger play structures and what cleaning may look like there. We will be doing routine cleaning on those structures. Per the CDC, outdoor equipment should not be disinfected due to the limited effectiveness. We also believe that the routine cleaning should suffice well in this case, in addition to what we're doing with the other equipment being disinfected and hands being cleaned on the way in. Now, if we do have a COVID case, our custodial staff will follow CDC guidelines for the cleaning and disinfecting. The space, usually a room, will be sectioned off. We will wait 24 hours, and then our team, the custodian team, will clean and disinfect using appropriate PPE. All right, shifting to ventilation, our HVAC systems, we are basing our approach to what we're going to do on guidelines from the CDC and the American Society of Heating, Refrigerating, and Air Conditioning Engineers. In short, we'll be opening dampers to allow for fresh outside air, much more than we typically do. We will be upgrading our air filters to the highest rated filter that won't adversely impact our systems. And we'll be replacing those filters at least every 3 months but we have crews out continually going from building to building, replacing those. We'll encourage opening windows in classrooms and throughout the building when possible. Obviously there, it is weather permitting. As we move into the winter months, that will be a little bit more difficult. We'll be running systems nonstop. And sometimes, and typically when there are low occupancy periods, they are not run, at least at those higher levels, for conservation purposes. However, we will be running those, and we'll be making sure in general that we're maximizing air exchange and getting that introduction of outside air as much as possible. Now, shift to food service. What we're currently doing is we are doing food distribution. We are allowed from the U.S. Department of Agriculture to distribute free meals that include breakfast and lunch to all students, or excuse me, all children 18 and younger, regardless of income or enrollment in our district. And the students do not need to be present to pick up the meals. It can be a parent or guardian. Distribution is occurring Mondays and Thursdays from 4 to 6 p.m. at designated locations. On Mondays, you'll receive 3 days of meals in one bag. On Thursdays, there will be 2 days of meals in one bag. These will be at 7 locations. They are Issaquah High, Skyline High, Liberty High, Endeavor Elementary, Grand Ridge Elementary, Issaquah Valley Elementary, and Sunset Elementary. We do have additional information on the district website if you'd like to know more about that. I will say that our food service staff follow all the CDC and health department guidelines for safety, and that includes social distancing and wearing a face mask. We will also be taking temperatures when our customers arrive prior to picking up their meals. Lastly, I'll talk about transportation and what bus riders can expect before they get to school and after. We'll be requiring face coverings to be worn at all times. Drivers will wear approved disposable masks, or they will be wearing face shields with cloth masks. At bus stops, students will need to maintain social distancing, except for those instances where they may have a sibling or someone else who resides in their household there with them. Bus drivers will be checking attestations prior to students riding the bus. Students will have assigned seats for contact tracing purposes. Students remain seated and follow driver instructions at all times. Buses will be loaded from front to back and unloaded, buses will be loaded from back to front and unloaded from the front to the back. We'll be following all OSPI guidance regarding social distancing in the buses, and that means assigning 1 student to a seat when feasible, but a maximum of 2 to a seat. Windows will be cracked open, and the upper vents in our buses will be opened for ventilation. And so we encourage students to bring warm clothing, a jacket, and potentially gloves if they choose. Buses will be sanitized and handrails wiped down between each route and when they return to the motor pool. That concludes my portion, so back to you, Dr. Almy.
Thank you, Martin. Next, we will transition to Assistant Superintendent Lisa Heckman, who will go over our myriad of safety procedures and protocols during COVID-19. Lisa, take it away.
Lisa, you're on mute.
Thanks. It was taking me a minute to get set up there in the transition. I'm going to present a little bit on perspective from what it means to be an individual and how we're going to interact with each other and how our behaviors are going to change from what we might have thought a previous experience would have been in our school buildings, with our teachers, with students, and with each other. We are during this time going to look at changing some behavior in order to maneuver appropriately. We're thinking and looking at everything being very thoughtful and very intentional. So trying to think ahead and anticipate, as you can see some of the work that was presented tonight in this presentation, trying to also talk through and explain why we are doing some of the steps we are taking. This is going to be critical when we go also back to in-person instruction and directions that need to be given to students around maintaining physical distancing, donning and doffing particular masks, or just in general, how we're going to interact. As Superintendent Thiele had shared, we are following the Public Health of Seattle-King County guidance, as well as Department of Health, OSHA, LNI, and a number of other organizations intended to keep our community healthy and able to be interacting. The intentionality around our actions is intended so that to specific situations and so that we can continue to move forward. Much of this is going to be process oriented, where it isn't going to be, and school will not look as fluid as it has in the past. There is going to be a level of staidness or a level of rigidity as we need to line up, as we need to take temperatures, and we need to protect each other as part of our process for protecting and contributing to community health. To that end, one of the first steps that we can take as a community member is, if a student is feeling ill, to please have them stay home. We've communicated this as well to our staff. I think our community has in the past tried to be one where school is engaging and inviting, and so we try to make it as best we can. During the coronavirus, we are asking to be very aware of and our own self-monitoring of our health. And if you're feeling any twinges or any sense of illness, particularly those around the coronavirus, we're going to ask you to stay home. Something that is a little bit different, other than just focusing on the student, is if another family member who lives in the same home as well has any of the coronavirus symptoms, the student should remain home then as well. As the family then continues to work through whether or not that is related to COVID or if it's related to another illness. When individuals are going to be coming to school or entering our buildings, as has been said, everyone must wear a face covering, and everyone, staff and students, will also be completing an electronic attestation prior to entering. This is going to be pushed out via district email to the district student accounts. And after you've logged in the very first time, a text messaging is an option if it's going to be easier for you to receive that on your mobile phone. If you need to visit or come during the day, maybe you're a visitor or you're needing to pick up your student for a dentist appointment or an appointment off campus, we're going to ask that you use one of our QR codes if you have a smartphone, or log in on a link that's going to be available, or you will be provided also a hard copy if that is going to be more convenient for you to complete, that attests to your health and does a symptom check prior to entering our facilities. Everybody, as has been mentioned, will be having their temperature taken with an infrared thermometer. Your temperature needs to be 100 degrees less than 100 degrees Fahrenheit. And that is a little bit different than what Seattle-King County has said. The 100-degree Fahrenheit aligns with our previous practice and practice that has been universal within our district. Further, we are going to ask that all visitors to our building are going to abide by appropriate behaviors in order to keep each other healthy and keep each other safe. As shared, a daily electronic health attestation is going to look and ask you questions such as this, such as, do you have any of these symptoms, to determine whether or not you should be able to enter our buildings? Have you been in close contact with anyone who has confirmed COVID-19, or have you been asked to isolate or to quarantine for the past 14 days from the date that we are asking you? Again, if a digital option is not going to be the way that you want to communicate with the school, we absolutely are going to have physical and hard copies available. It's what we are currently using as we pilot this particular program. You do need to know that we are going to be monitoring these health checks on a daily basis as part of attendance in an effort to keep the community healthy, and in an effort to see if we are going to have any spikes in particular areas, or just to be able to contribute to, again, our own ongoing health. Everyone who enters our buildings, as Superintendent Thiele has shared, and Mr. Attorney did as well, must wear a cloth face covering. You can see examples from here on the poster as part of the presentation as what those different options are. And we want to make sure that the face covering is going to be covering from above the nose to below the chin during the school day. It's going to be important to have a face covering on top of being able to observe physical distancing. And regardless of where we are in our facilities, while we are indoors, we are going to be asking that everyone wear that face covering. As Assistant Superintendent Bongard had shared previously, the one place that there is an exception is when we are outdoors and physically distanced from each other. It gives us the opportunity to breathe easy and maybe take a pause from that mask before we put it back on and enter back into our buildings. It will be rare that students will not be able to wear a face covering, but there are instances, as you can see in that final bullet, that if we do have an individual adult, let's say working alone in an office or working alone in a classroom, it is not necessary to maintain the face covering. And again, another way to give ourselves a bit of a break. Part of mask etiquette is that we are always going to want to hand sanitize or wash your hands before you put on, don your face covering, and after you have taken it off. You should use the loops from your face mask and try to refrain from covering or from using the actual face covering in order to adjust it on your face. Again, wanting it to be up over the nose and under the chin, but refrain from grabbing it this way even as you are trying to take it off. If it's cloth, you are going to want to wash and dry it on a daily basis in order to be able to have it the freshest and be able to have it ready to go for daily use. You can see that it is being very well modeled by our superintendent here on the screen as another effort in order to communicate that for everyone. I'm going to go ahead and leave my mask on just for a minute because I've got another slide coming up. We do want you to understand that there are probably going to be some exceptions to wearing a face covering, but it was going to be something that we have to have documented and that there are procedures around for us to accommodate. It isn't going to be something that upon arrival that just because there might not be a ready habit of wearing a face mask, in order to enter our buildings, we are going to have to put one on. If you don't have one, we can make arrangements to have a disposable one given to you out of our own supplies. But we do want everybody to understand that that will be an automatic pause at our entrance if for some reason you aren't bringing your own. For students who might have some sensitivity to wearing a face covering or might have other health issues, we are going to want to know those so that we can work through either the individualized education process, the IEP, or a 504 health accommodation in order to make sure that that student is supported and well taken care of while he or she is with us in person. If there is just abject refusal to wearing a mask, we do want to make everybody aware that that does mean it is a refusal to entry into the facilities because we are part of and interacting underneath the guise of public health. It doesn't mean though that that might be permanent. It might just mean that we need to have an ongoing conversation as to how we might be able to entertain the prospects within our facilities. And it might even be something where we will be able to provide an alternative option in order for us to meet and continue to conduct business or continue to support students on all of our behalf. As Mr. Attorney mentioned, some of the personal protective equipment are that we have available, as you can see from our food service workers, is having particularly face shields that go on. If you're going to be working with more than one student in less than 6 feet, it would be an addition that we would want added. Or if you're going to be an employee and you are in our isolation rooms and in our isolation protocols, Part of that is also going to then be wearing a disposable gown over our clothing. Wanted you to be aware of that so that students are not nervous as individuals are approaching them when we're trying to help somebody who has become ill during the day, because we want to make sure that they can be as healthy as possible and so that all of us are protected. We do have gowns and goggles in certain instances, another barrier for having to interact with another individual for an extended time. PPE is not necessarily universal in our particular situation. It is very specific to the task and very specific to the assignment and what we're trying to accomplish in that moment. So staff could be fully geared up at times, and then at other times just be wearing a face covering and limited protection in that way. It's important, since I've taken off the face covering again, that healthy hand hygiene is going to be one of the ways that we take care of each other. And as Jody mentioned, anytime that we're going to be entering a room, we're going to ask students to take care of washing their hands or using hand sanitizer. We also are trying to let you know this so that as you are at home and we are starting to gear up, it would allow you also to practice with your students. Let's say that there are handing and sharing of a pen that we want to hand sanitize or hand wash before you pick up the pen, hand somebody the pen, and then after its use, that you would go ahead and take care of that with your hands after using the utensil. One of the pieces that we want to help everybody learn too is if you are not practiced at coughing into an elbow or coughing away from using your hands, that we want to start practicing that. So it's a ready habit as well. If for some reason you do want to cover your cough or sneeze, we want to make sure that we get our hands clean right after that. Hand washing is the recommendation from Washington State Department of Labor and Industries, the CDC, OSHA, and others. Far more so than gloving up or wearing gloves, as there have been some indicators that wearing gloves and moving from space to space may mean that some of the touch and tactile pieces of the coronavirus might transfer with those gloves. So good idea to be able to get used to using hand sanitizer and washing your hand multiple times throughout the day. In our schools, we are going to observe physical distancing at 6 feet, even if we are conversing with only one other person, particularly if that person does not reside with us. So exceptions to this might be siblings, a parent and a child, but if a parent and a child is talking to a teacher, we need to make sure that we've got 6 feet of distancing between the individuals. As we move about our buildings, we are going to bring back the idea of knocking and pausing at doorways so people can acknowledge each other, so that they can put on a face mask if that's appropriate, or so that they can adjust their presence in the room to make sure that physical distancing is maintained. We do want to limit the contact and be specific about the interaction and movement of people within our buildings and between people. So in general, we're not going to be looking for groups of people to congregate. People should minimize any sort of mixing. So Ms. Heckman's class should not necessarily interact with Ms. Hood's class. Even if we're out on the recess, we're going to have zones in which to play. Any lines or any sort of places where there might be sort of a bottleneck as you're trying to maybe get into school, we are going to want to practice and having that 6 feet of distancing. So it'll be great if you can essentially take maybe a long broomstick or that type of piece and practice with your students so that they can get a visual as to what some of that distance means and what that might look like as they become aware of how they interact around others and the awareness of having other people around them. In our facilities, it's reasonable for a person to request another person to observe that physical distancing, and we would expect our students to be able to do that as well. And we're going to either need to adjust by stopping any sort of progression. Maybe it's just moving to a different part of the room has the distance of 6 feet. It's walking against the hallway walls in a hallway. It might be taking a different direction in order to maintain that sort of distance. We need to be clear that it is unreasonable for a person not to acknowledge that request and not to work with the other person making the request to make that come to life and make that available. We want everybody to know, including our students, that if for some reason somebody is not going to abide by this particular etiquette or this particular set of behaviors, we want them to find a trusted adult, and let's have a conversation with those individuals in order to be able to take care of and promote the correct behavior that we're going to want to see in our schools. All of us are going to be experiencing some new behaviors. As Jody mentioned, our classrooms are not going to be grouped with students. Again, many of our classrooms might have tables where students were sharing 2 or 4 to a table. And you can see that in the picture, it's going to go much back to that traditional row and squared off presentation. You can see in the middle of the screen with a recess plan, where those pink boxes are areas where students or classes might play if we were going to have multiple classes on the playground at any one time. Again, trying to help everybody visualize what physical distancing looks like in order for us to stay healthy. We're going to hear things like stay in your bubble or stay in your circle, or we're only going to have individualized supplies for students to use, and really minimize that shared stapler or minimize the shared hole punch, thinking about how we are going to interact as we are back together in person. As I shared, I included this here so that when we go ahead and post this particular presentation, you would have the link to the Public Health of Seattle King County and the toolkit that we reference on a regular basis. The Public Health has provided a number of templates and good guides for us to be able to interact with our families around and to be able to interact with each other. Probably will be important to help everybody understand that we do recognize particularly at this time of year, as we head into a school day, that there is the potential of somebody to develop an illness during the day. And we recognize that we're heading into flu season. We recognize that we have students with allergies. We even recognize that as we are headed out to recess and we come back in, some of us can tend to get a little bit of a runny nose as we reacclimate because of temperature. So we are taking some of those pieces into account as we then begin to interact with students and each other in this way. We need to make you aware that if anybody is presenting a COVID-like symptom for that prolonged period of time while they are in our facilities, we are going to treat that as if that it is a suspected case and treat it in accordance with the protocols that have been outlined for us in which to react. So the first step that we would do is take that student to an isolation space. And while the weather continues to be good and while we have covered areas, we are going to want to be outside if at all possible, because the fresh air and the movement of air is one of the indicators, rather than being in an enclosed space, that allows us to continue to maintain general health. So as Mr. Turney even mentioned with our transportation, that windows and vents are going to be open, we're encouraging everybody to think about layering and dressing in layers so that as you are indoors and comfortable, you can take layers off. And as we head outdoors, or maybe needing to be on a bus or in isolation, we're going to layer up in order to be able to come to school. For those students who might be thinking, great, this is going to be a way for me to avoid school, I'll just put all my clothes on in order to have my temperature go up. So when they take my temperature at the doors, I'm not going to have to stay and I'm going to get sent home. We are going to get to work with you a little bit around letting your temperature drop. And let's have you take off some of those jackets. We'll take it again, and we'll make sure that you can come on in and be in a classroom with us. In an isolation space, there may be more than one student. And so you need to know that in our spaces, they are large enough for there to be physical distancing while we maintain the support of students who are ill. And as we interact with them, you do need to know that we're going to ask students several questions, such as which one of these symptoms are you feeling, or maybe there are multiple symptoms. And we are going to use the symptoms of the coronavirus illness as our starting point. Some of those are innocuous, such as a headache or a runny nose, with others being a bit more concerning, such as nausea or diarrhea, etc. We're going to ask where they've been in the building, what classrooms have they been in, what hallways, what restrooms, just sort of what were their movements during the time that they were with us. Who were they with? Were they in close contact with anybody? And close contact might be closer than 6 feet for greater than 15 minutes. We're going to want to know, even at home, who are they with over the last couple of days? Anybody sick in the home and presenting some of these particular symptoms? We've fully recognize that a kindergartner and a first grader might not know all of this information. As a result, we are going to call parents and guardians in order to interact with them as well, if their student is ill, to see if we could get some information from them. We do ask that parents come promptly for picking up their child, because it might mean that we need to have you go and contact your own your own healthcare provider, or that we're going to have you go to a free testing site if the symptoms are such that, and the information that we gain is such that that would be the recommendation. We do ask that if with these suspected cases, as you go get tested, that you communicate the results to us as quickly as possible. Because what is ending up happening is we might need to contact other people who may have been in close contact if for some reason there is a positive case. So the other students who are in that classroom of the affected child will be moved to another space. As Mr. Turney talked about, that classroom then has the windows opened up and we close it to use for the rest and the remainder of that day, while we wait for 24 hours before we go in and clean and disinfect it. That is current guidance. Once the classroom is cleaned and disinfected, the class can return to and use that room to the best of their ability, and as if they would on a daily basis. But there is going to be a lag time. So you might hear from your students that A, they were moved out of a classroom for that day, and B, they didn't necessarily go back, depending upon what time of day that we know about any illness or any sort of exposure may have occurred. An affected student who is ill during the day, I'm going to show you a chart just a little bit later that talks about how you determine when they should be returning to school. So there's two types of cases that we will be interacting around. A suspected case, because we aren't healthcare practitioners and we don't know the results of tests in the immediate. Results of tests are currently taking about 48 hours to come from public health or from a healthcare provider. So there is a lag time. And in that lag time, we are going to work as if it was a suspected case. Please know that we cannot share the individual's name. So you're not going to know exactly who from us that might have been ill that day. We are probably going to contact you that we have had to move the classroom. And as part of that, just one more time, give the reminder of the prevention measures that we have in place, and that we can ask you as families and our community members to participate with us on in order to keep everybody healthy. If it's a confirmed case, again, it's usually going to be a lag time of at least 48 hours. So there's going to be a cadence here that is going to feel maybe concerning for some, but it's the fastest that we are able to move in order to provide appropriate information. You will get information if you're not a close contact, and just a generic reminder of what those prevention measures are, or if it is found that you are a close contact, and we find that out by talking with the individuals. Were you with this particular person for within 6 feet for longer than 15 minutes, or are you by any chance living with somebody who has tested positive for COVID? Those are considered close contacts. We are going to request that you go and be tested and that we have confirmation of a case if you are somebody who has just been exposed, that you notify us as a school that the results of those tests, so that we can talk with you around how long you are going to be isolated or quarantined and how we're going to interact with you as an individual while that occurs, while the rest of the class may continue in person. Everything is determined by who is in close contact. So whether we close down a classroom or a hallway or a wing or a school, all depends upon what cases we have, where people have traveled, and if somebody has a positive or a confirmed case of COVID-19. This chart is produced by Public Health of Seattle-King County, and it does a nice job of outlining what symptoms are, and then as a result of those symptoms, what can happen. Can you come to school or can you not come to school, and what those considerations are and for how long. It can be anywhere from 24 hours and then with the resolution of a fever to 14 days, a full 2 weeks that somebody may be out of school. So wanted to provide that chart because it's something that we reference on a regular basis as we interact with people around concerns for COVID-19. Key information from this dense presentation and from all of us. If you are at all feeling unwell, stay home. This is not going to be the time that we want anybody to gut it out. It's just not going to be worth it. And we want you to be healthy so that you can come back and participate with us when you're feeling better. Time is a consideration when and if we are interacting with individuals. So if anytime we are interacting with individuals for greater than 15 minutes, it's more important then that we also then maintain a 6 feet of social distancing. Those are two pieces that are linked and connected. 15 minutes and 6 feet become important when we start talking about whether or not you have a confirmed case or if you are a close contact of a confirmed case. Those are going to be distances and lengths of time that will be part of our interaction with you and are part of our interview. Everybody's temperature needs to be 100 degrees or less. It says there 100 degrees or greater. You need to know that if that happens, we're going to ask you not to enter our buildings. Reminder for hand hygiene. If you're washing your hands, we want to do at least 20 seconds, which is the happy birthday song twice through, multiple times per day. So want you to practice making sure that you get all the way up on your wrists and between your fingers as you do that hand washing. Facial coverings that are cloth are mandatory if you're going to enter our buildings, even if you're coming just as a guest, but especially if you are coming as a student or a staff member with us. We want awareness of what the space is if you're indoors and if you are outdoors. Outdoors give you a little bit more flexibility around the mask. Indoors, no question, we need to be wearing those face coverings. And we absolutely want to take care of each other and limit any exposure and be able to stop if for some reason somebody is exposed to COVID-19. So the daily attestation that is electronic and our follow-up on it is going to be important for us to work with on a daily basis, and we appreciate your cooperation as we work through those issues. References here at the end, just so that you can see that it takes a lot of people in order to interact and work during a pandemic, and that we are doing a lot of care and reading and researching and planning in order to be able to welcome all of our students back at some point to in-person learning. So, Dr. Almy, yours.
Thank you, Lisa. Finally, we're going to hand it back to our Superintendent, Ron Thiele, who will wrap up our presentation for the evening. Superintendent Thiele, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Dr. Almy and staff. Wow, you can tell from all of these updates, managing the Issaquah School District through this pandemic is complex and challenging at times. Having said that, please know we are all committed to creating the best experience possible for our students, given all the limitations of this pandemic. And I'm confident that our school district and this community will get through this difficult time in our history and emerge even stronger on the other side. We will continue to provide updates through e-news communications, video messages, and on our website and social media sites. Thank you for tuning into this update. And again, please continue to practice good virus mitigation behaviors and stay healthy, everyone. Thank you.